Hey everyone. Hopefully this is going to work this time. We had some technical difficulties with the YouTube Live that I was doing a couple minutes ago, so I've started one again, and fingers crossed that this works this time. This is the Keys to Open Communication webinar, and it was one that I wanted to do because, so I've been doing authentic relating work for the past 6 years. And one of the biggest differences that it's made to me is it used to be that I had conversations that were, I didn't even really have conversations that were difficult. Anytime I had a conflict with a friend, I pretty much ran away from it. I just had no idea how tough conversations were supposed to work. I didn't have the tools, and every time a relationship ended, I didn't ask why, because I assumed it was because something was wrong with me. And I got into these strings of connections, like friendships, relationships, whatever, especially throughout college, where we would just hang out constantly. I would have sleepovers at their house. I would go on adventures, do 24-hour film competitions, cover my bike in Christmas lights and ride around downtown with my friend and, do polyphasic sleeping, all of this stuff. And then the friendship or relationship would end. I would get a phone call like, hey, I'm not into this anymore. And I wouldn't know how to ask why. I think I would even get signs that something was wrong before the relationship ended, and I wouldn't know how to respond. I wouldn't know how to have the conversation. I think that a lot more love is possible in relationship when we can have these kinds of tough conversations. And now that I've been doing authentic relating work for years, I have those tools, and it's made a huge difference. Like, my relationship with my family is way closer. I can ask for more of what I need from my parents and from other people, such that the relationships are a lot more powerful. And in my friendships and relationships, like, even when they end, I can be in community with these people. I don't lose contact. It's a massive change. It's still terrifying to have those conversations, but I have the capacity now. And that's what I care about. That's what I want to share with you. Yeah. I'm feeling a little emotional right now, actually, because having started this webinar half an hour ago and having had technical difficulties, it really made me realize that, I care a lot about this. I've had a bunch of really tough conversations with friends this week using these tools. And even though it was painful, it feels like surfing a wave rather than being drowned by one. And I actually felt really emotional when the webinar didn't work. So I don't know if anyone is watching this now, but it matters to me that you are. And I'm looking forward to giving you this. And at the end of the call, there's going to be an offer for a course that I've spent the whole past year creating called Authentic Life Leadership, that's meant to give you practice in these tools, give you a way to apply them everywhere in your life for 9 weeks, working with other people, working with a coach, so that you have not only the tools, but also the support to change the relationships in your life. Okay, let's get started. So there's 4 parts to this. The first one is preparation. The second one is making it safe for other people to have the conversation, making it safe for yourself, and then a magic trick that I'll give you at the end. And we'll talk also about why making it safe would even be important. But let's start with the preparation. First part of this is think about why you're having the conversation. You can go into conversations with a whole bunch of different intentions. And oftentimes, one of the biggest disconnections to me in relationship happens when I think I'm having one conversation and the other person thinks we're having a totally different one. I think we're out for coffee. They think we're on a date. I think I'm trying to get a raise. They think they're trying to fire me. It's really awkward when these conversations go wrong. So get clear beforehand. Think about, why do you want to have this conversation? Sometimes my intention is even something like, I just want them to acknowledge that I was right. And it's not necessarily wrong to have that intention. I may not get what I want, but if I go in like that and I'm like holding that as my actual desire, and what I'm saying is something like, I just want to hear your point of view, they're going to feel it, and I'm going to be subtly pushing for something different than what I say. I'm not really going to be open to them if what I want is to feel right. So if I can tell them, I want to feel validated, I want to feel heard in this conversation. That's my intention. And if I feel heard, then I'll be open to hearing you. That's clear. These like underlying things that we kind of know are there, but we don't really hear, that's what causes bad communication a lot of the time. So thinking beforehand about why you're having the conversation is really important. So something I want you to consider throughout, I want you to think about a conversation you want to have with someone that you haven't had yet, or you've been scared to have or haven't known how to. And just consider, like, as I make these points, how they apply to that connection. So in this case, if you think of a conversation, what's your intention? What do you want going into that conversation? It may even be clarifying and having it just to think about that. So, second part of preparation, get clear on what you want to say. One of the reasons that tough conversations have traditionally been hard for me is when I get overwhelmed, I forget what I wanted to say. I get flooded. I start kind of feeling kind of panicky. My brain goes blank. I don't even know why I'm having the conversation in the first place. And I forget everything. And oftentimes I'll just go into, don't worry about it. It's fine. We don't need to have the conversation. I didn't want anything anyways. And I walk away, and then I go, shit, I actually wanted something there. So thinking first about what I want to say has been really valuable for me. Like, what are the main points? What would I be upset if I ended the conversation not having said or discussed or gotten these things? Another part of this, recalling what happened as objectively as possible. So I'll get caught up in like, well, I felt hurt. And they're like, well, what did I do that made you feel hurt? I don't know. I just felt hurt. They don't have much to bounce back on. When I can name a moment, it's easier for the other person to actually understand, to recall, to think about what happened for them in that moment, to get my point of view on it. It's really easy for conversations to go into like a he said, she said without this. Like, it was French bread, not a baguette, but now we're not talking about your alcohol addiction. And we may never get back to it. So yeah, be objective. Actually, in conflict mediation, they talk about how, the steps of conflict mediation are like setting up context, getting the stories out, getting into like the emotions and the kind of reactions to what happened, and then brainstorming a common solution. The getting the story out part, when I studied this, they said it's not that important. People need to feel like they've spoken, but you're not going to get the same story on both sides. People see things differently. That's just a fact. So it's more about giving someone the chance to speak and really not getting attached to the truth of what happened, because you're going to have different truths. So that's one part. And then the last is in thinking about what you want to say. So we're in the preparation stage, first of which is figure out the intention of why you're here, get clear on that. Think about what you want to say. And in thinking about what you want to say, like I've said, it's really hard for me when I get overwhelmed in a tough conversation to remember what I wanted. And sometimes it's hard for me to stop considering the other person's perspective long enough to take my own. Do any of you have a problem with this? Sometimes before conversations, I will have a bitch session with a friend, or just on a voice recorder on my phone. I'll call someone, I'll say, can I just like go off for a minute? Like set a 3-minute timer. I'm just going to completely unfiltered, unowned, be upset, tell you all the shit that I know I shouldn't say. And we have an agreement that they're going to, not take that at face value. And then I say, okay, now I realize what's really going on for me. So that's the process of getting clear. Um, Next is to set up the space. So think ahead of the time about what puts you and the other person in the best space to have tough conversations. Do you communicate best in writing, while moving, around other people, alone? There's safe spaces for each person. And if you really think about what your safe space is and what the other person's is, um, that's a powerful tool. So, an example of this that my friend Laura gave me that I really love is teenagers are really uncomfortable with eye contact. So, if you have a conversation with them, try to do it where you're not staring them directly in the eye. Have it in the car while you're driving and they're in the back seat. Pretend to be picking lint off your clothes while you do it, not looking at them. That's a way of making them potentially feel more safe. So, and I think this often gets passed by in some ways, that it's really important that space um, can create safety. So I want you to think for a second right now, what are the spaces and situations that make you feel most comfortable? Are there, is it at home? Is it out? Is it at work? Do you feel comfortable if you initiate the conversation, if you start talking, or if the other person does, if you ask questions for a while, if you state your point of view? So think through that. Um, Last piece in preparation: claim your power. In conversations, there are things that we want other people to do and things we can do ourselves. And in tough conversations, one of the things that happens that I think makes them most difficult is I focus on what I want from the other person, but not what I can do. So it's like, I just need you to clean the dishes, or I need you to stop flirting with other people. Now, the other person can say yes or no to this. And the problem is, either they say yes and it's authentic for them, and that's great. Um, Or they say yes, and it's actually not authentic for them. It's not something that they can do. And because of that, they're trying to fulfill something that isn't authentic to them. And they're probably not going to actually be able to do it. Because when we try to do something that's not true for us, we fall back into the old patterns again and again. We need to continue having these tough conversations, and it doesn't really go anywhere. Or they say no to the request, and I'm like, okay, well, what do I do now? So, claiming your power means you figure out what you can do, not what the other person can do. What are the actions and boundaries that are under your control? I'll give an example of this. Um, I have a close friend who keeps canceling or rescheduling hangouts with me. And it's annoying because I love him and I set aside time. And then, the day of, I'll hear, nope, he's not available. And for me, when that happens, I actually feel dropped. I feel hurt. I feel disempowered. But I'm giving him the power to, show up or not, to make me happy or not, right? I will have a conversation with him. He'll recommit to, showing up. It won't happen. I'll get annoyed again. It's just like the constant cycle. So finally, I took some time to figure out what it is that I want in the relationship and what boundaries I have. And what I decided is I'm only going to schedule time with him if he reaches out to me, if he comes to me, and if it's in a social situation. Because then, even if he doesn't show up, it's not a big impact on me. And maybe after a while, if our dynamic changes, I'll be willing to hang out one-on-one again. But now I know that I need to have stronger boundaries around it. And those decisions all depend on me. They don't depend on him. And that means that I'm not resentful of him when we connect. There's going to be an entire module on this on the Authentic Life Leadership course that I'll tell you about on the end of the call, because I think there's such a huge range of skill around making requests. So just to catch you up, if you came on late, we're talking about how to have really effective open conversations, even ones that are tough. We just talked about how to prepare for conversations. Get clear on your intention for having them, get clear on what you want to say, set up the space in a way that feels really good to you, and claim your power, what you can do. So the next thing is make it safe for them to speak. And I want to talk for a minute about safety. This is kind of a combated word in our community, because a lot of people really like pushing their edge. They like going past the comfort zone to learn something new. And I also think that's fantastic. But I think that when we don't have an underlying sense of safety, we go past our comfort zone and we fall. It can actually re traumatize parts of ourselves. So I'm a big advocate for figuring out the baseline of safety such that we can push further. I can have a conversation that's harder. I can make more intense requests if I know that I and the other person have a baseline of, okay, we're going to continue in relationship, or okay, we're on the same page, or something like that. So, uh, on just like a biological level, to get nerdy about this for a second, there's part of our brain that's always tracking, am I safe? Am I part of the group? Do I belong? Because, evolutionarily, if I got kicked out of the group, I would die in the wild. So my brain cares about that. There's something called psychological safety that contributes massively to creativity, to how well teams work together, to how, well people are able to think. And you can create this in conversations. And that's a lot of what this webinar is about. How do you create psychological safety within connections, even when having a tough conversation? So how do you do that? The first is, how do you make it safe for them? Part one, share your intention. We talked about this already, getting clear on yours, but also hearing them. So to get this, you can say, I'm here because whatever. I'm here because I want to connect more with you. I'm here because I want to talk about getting a raise. I'm here because I'm annoyed and I just want to clear that. Why are you here? What do you want from this? Even if it's not an intention that you can meet or want to, they know they've been heard, and they know that you at least get their intention and can hold it a little bit with them. Part two, listen. Actually, this seems like a really simple one, but I think oftentimes it's not. The fact is, we can only pay attention to 1.5 conversations at the same time. So if I'm listening to the conversation going on in my head about what I want to say next and what the other person did, why they're such an asshole, a-hole, I'm not I only have 0.5% of my attention, 0.5 attention to listen to them. I'm only catching half of what they're saying. So we can feel it if someone's not present. It's like, I'm totally listening. I really think that you should do this differently. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. The reason why this is so hard, why it's like easier to say listening than do it, is because our minds carry a backlog of other things to think about. And we have to really pull them into the present moment, sit them down and go, okay, we're not going to think about World of Warcraft for the next 10 minutes. We're going to intentionally choose to meditate on the connection with the person in front of us. And every time our attention wanders, we're going to bring it back. I sometimes think I have like multiple voices, multiple like almost people in my head, and have to like almost talk to them. Like, okay, come on, guys, focus. A lot of the time, all people really need is to be heard. And if they feel heard, then a lot of the other parts of the conversation aren't necessary. We don't have to give someone always what they want. We just have to have them feel like we're here with them. Another key for doing that is the tool of reflecting and summarizing. This can be the, classic nonviolent communication of, what I heard you say is, which some people get really pissed off by, and others actually really feel heard by. The reason I like that tool is it gives me time to think. While I'm reflecting the other person, it de-escalates me when I'm just like, I want to, but I'm right. Okay, I heard you say that you have a different opinion than me, and that in your reality, I hurt you. Is that true? By the time I finish that sentence, even if I don't believe it, my trigger level has gone down, and they know that I've gotten what they're saying. So even though I think this is a nerdy tool, I end up using it a lot. And you don't have to remember the whole thing. You can even just reflect me in words. Last one, on making it safe for them, appreciate. So for those of you on here, I'm going to send out a worksheet afterwards that has some tips on this. But I find that one of the things that's scary about tough conversations is like, oftentimes in a place that's been my source of love, I'm bringing in something that's a source of fear or pain. It's like, this is my safe space. This person is who I go to when I'm having a tough time, and I'm having a tough time right now, and I want to go to them, but they're the person that's having me feel hurt. that I feel hurt with. So what do I do? For the fear and pain that gets added to an interaction, it's really good to intentionally put in love and care as well. And that can just be like offering one genuine thing, like, hey, I know that having this conversation might be tough for you, and I really appreciate that you're staying in it anyways. I think that takes a lot of bravery. Try to find that hint of de-escalation, that way of making them feel heard, that way of appreciation. I guarantee you that that is huge in turning around conversations. On that note, I'd love it if you take a minute right now and think, in one conversation in your life that you want to have, one person you want to connect with and don't know how to, what's one thing that you genuinely appreciate about this person that makes it even worthwhile to have the conversation? Just try to notice that. It doesn't mean that you don't have to still be mad at them. Just set that aside for 1 minute. Be present to what is it that you appreciate. And notice if that even changes your feeling towards them. Okay. I'm appreciative for those of you who are on. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel close to you even across the screen. And next piece, make it safe for yourself to speak. The first part of this, allow for space. Oftentimes, when I'm in a conflict with someone, I just want to figure it out. I want to stay in there with them all night if I have to, clear the conflict, not have to worry about it anymore. It can just go away after that. And it's like 4 a.m. and we've been processing for 5 hours and both of us are exhausted and we're at the point we just want to be like, I'm done. Let's go. Relationship is over. Like too painful. And if we were resourced, we might actually be fine continuing the conversation. But there's like this black hole of processing that I sometimes get in that I can't pull myself out of. To make it safe for you to speak, like I said at the beginning of the webinar, you can consider what spaces make you feel most safe, like what physical locations, whether you're walking or sitting, whether you communicate by text or face to face. I generally like face to face because less communication is lost. Nonverbal means a lot. But in general, really giving yourself the time to be in your best space when you're having a tough conversation is good. And so take a break, go for a walk, go for a run, appreciate something about the other person, go talk to a friend, do something to de-escalate for a bit before you come back to the connection, just to give yourself enough mental space to actually be present. One of the things I do, I have just a lot of energy in general. So before I have tough conversations, I go for a run because it works off enough energy that I can be present to the other person. I'm not just like running a million stories in my head and really distracted. I have enough slowness and space to be empathetic. I think going into conversations slowed down is really important. That's why I like doing the bitch sessions that I do with my friends where I'm just like, let me just bitch for a minute. I'm going to get all of this off my chest so I don't have it in my brain when I go into the conversation. Part 2, making it safe for yourself. Ask for consent. I had an interaction with a friend of mine this weekend who has a hard time initiating conversations with other people or being welcome in them. He says one of the things that happens is when he goes up to someone and he tries to have a conversation, he can't tell whether or not they want to have the conversation. And his mind is on this loop of like, am I welcome here? Am I wanted here? Is the other person open to this? Am I crossing their boundaries? With all of those thoughts, he can't really be present to the other person. And I think conversations actually get pretty painful for him because of it. So the simple way around that is just ask, hey, are you open to having this conversation right now? Would anything have you feel more comfortable? Let them give a yes or a no, because then at least they've agreed to be more dropped into it. It's like a transition, a state shift. Like, okay, yes, I've been given choice about whether to have this conversation. I said yes, I'm here now. Step 3, get shared reality. This is like what we talked about before, that oftentimes if you're on different pages in a conversation, things are going to get really confusing. Doesn't mean getting on the same page about the story of what happened. You might not have the same reality about that. We tend to think reality is objective. It's really not. People have very different views on what happened, and trying to get somebody on the same view may actually be impossible. I don't know if you experience sadness the same way I do. I don't know if me shouting at you is going to trigger you or if it's going to like light you up and excite you. There's so many factors in what make us who we are that trying to get clear on that is helpful, but not the absolute necessary thing in the conversation. The thing that's most necessary is making sure that we're on the same page about the emotions that we're feeling, what different things meant to us, what matters to the other person. So these more core like beliefs, intentions, orientations, emotions, that's what's a good thing to get on the same page about. And if you start feeling that like weird sense of like, I like don't know where I am in space, this is confusing, something feels off here, it's probably a lack of shared reality, and it's a good time to check, hey, are we having the same conversation here? Like what's true for you right now? What do you hear me saying? And last one, be on the same side of the problem. So a lot of the time when we're having conflict, it's like we're on different sides and the conflict is like the gremlin between us. And we're both like, you did this, you did this, you did this, you did this. The fact is, oftentimes we have a shared intention that we can get to at the beginning of the conversation. And when we have that shared intention, we get to come around and we get to be on the same side of the problem, looking at it, going, okay, so we both want to connect with each other. How do we get that need met? And if we're brainstorming it together, it's a lot more fun and a lot less painful. Uh, some of my favorite writers on conflict resolution, Fisher and Uray, talk about this as focusing on interests, not positions. I'm going to give you one last thing. Well, two things, but a last info point, which is a magic trick for having better connections. So we've talked about how to prepare for a conversation. We've talked about how to make it safe for the other person, how to make it safe for yourself. If you didn't get all of that information, I'll be sending out the recording. The last part is the magic trick of connection. And that is to have a conversation about how you relate best. So this can be in the preparation phase. It can be in a debrief after the conversation. It can be in the middle of the conversation. You can pause and you can go, okay, is this working for you? Like, do you feel safe right now? Is there anything that have you feel more safe? It could be before the conversation saying, okay, it feels like in the past, sometimes we haven't had, something's been off in connection when we've talked. Like, what would have you feel heard? What's your most comfortable place to talk in? What do you think is happening for me? Or after a conversation, what happened for you there? What could have been better? These sorts of things, there's something in agile programming called a retrospective, which is after you do the whole programming sprint, every team takes some time and they look back, they have a meeting and they say, okay, what could have been better? What can we do next time to improve that even more? This is like your conversational retrospective or pretrospective or whatever. Perspective. I don't know. Someone can message me the word for that. It's looking at how you can do something well even before you've done it. And I find that to be the magic trick because it makes everything else better. It's like conversations continuously up level. And I think that's the thing I didn't get when I was in college and I was having difficult conversations, was that you can actually work on the relationship as well as in the relationship. You can make relationships better by talking about them, by putting intention in, by preparing, such that every time you have a conversation, even if you're rehashing the same topic, you're doing it in a better, more generative way. And I think that's why a lot of my interactions are so much more rich and fulfilling than they ever have been. So now that I've told you all that, I hope that was helpful. And I want to tell you about one more thing, which is a course I created that I want to give you a special offer for on this call. And the reason is, A, I'm really appreciative that you stuck around despite the technical difficulties. And B, I know this stuff is really hard to integrate. I know it's hard to transform relationships that have been in your life for a long time that maybe you're stuck in different patterns in. I found this hardest with my family. Like, I've been around my family for 26 years. How do I change these patterns? And when I try that on my own, it's immensely difficult. So I've created a course called Authentic Life Leadership. And the intention of it is to give you all the support you could possibly need in transforming the relationships in your life. So you don't have to go to workshops or festivals or attend webinars to get the kind of relational transformation that you want. You can take this course from anywhere. It's a 9-week online program. It's got a coach. If you choose, you can be put in a triad of other people to practice with. It's the most powerful way I know of to actually deepen the relationships in your life. And the cool thing is, if you stuck around, the course is usually $450. And for the next 15 minutes on this call, you're going to be able to get it for $300. And we'll send you a link afterwards for that if you missed it. And the price is going to go up within 24 hours. So I recommend you actually do it now if you can, because oftentimes I find that people forget later on. So basically, you get the course for a third off, and you still get all of the content in it. I do live trainings for considerably more than this. And to be honest, I think that the possibility of doing it within your life is a lot more powerful, especially having as much support as the course offers. It's 9 weeks of videos, usually 1 to 2 hours of video per week, assignments to do with your triad that you're going to be with, and also with people in your life, and solo. It's got tons of resources. It's highly interactive, a lot of fun. The next cohort for that starts at the beginning of October. There's also one in November. There's even a self-paced version that you can take. So go ahead and click on the link if you're interested in that. If you have questions, you can put them in chat. Sweet, they're actually chats. I didn't even see that until now. Okay. Feel grateful for all of you who showed up. So we'll put the link in chat for this. Hopefully that'll show up in a minute. Actually, let me go ahead and find it. Oh, YouTube doesn't allow links in chat. That's fun. Okay. We will post the link. Actually, give me a second. So we'll see if that shows up in chat. In the meantime, if you guys have any questions, it's too smart. Okay, if you guys have any questions, we'll go ahead and email out the link now. So if you check your email in just a couple minutes, you will find that. And we should also probably be posting it on the Facebook page. In the meantime, if you have any questions on the webinar or on the course, please go ahead and put those in chat, and I'd be happy to answer them. And if you don't have questions, I'll say some of the things that people have found, shifts that they've gotten from the course. Key outcomes of the course. Awesome question. So the major key outcome for me is having all of you be able to deepen connection and clear conflicts and get more of what you want within the relationships that already exist in your life. I think oftentimes when I go through personal growth work, I end up needing to start new relationships in order to feel met. And what I wanted to do was create a way for you to get met within the relationships that you already have. So the modules are things like, at the very beginning, you'll identify a couple situations in your life that you want to shift. You'll get really clear on what in your life is draining you and what's resourcing you, what the general themes are, and you'll get a group of people to practice with if you so choose and get to do some of that work with them. Then we'll go into what actually forms the context of your life. Like, what are the belief patterns, the social situations, the environments that make it so your life couldn't be anything but what it is right now? And starting to see that will start giving you more choice. Um, like this kind of when you can see the intention of a conversation, then you all of a sudden can have choice over it. Um, the course will do the same thing, but on a broader scale. And then we'll go into some really cool stuff on making requests. So we talked about this a little in this webinar, but there's so much more on how do you set up a request? How do you really find what you want, ask for what you want, set up the situation so you're more likely to get it, hear the other person's point of view. We'll go into getting feedback. So how do you ask for feedback and really get direct reflection on how you show up in your life such that it's creating situations, and what do people think are your geniuses and your like kryptonites that you may not see? That's oftentimes people's favorite module because you it's really insightful to be able to ask for that sort of feedback and get it, and we'll show you how to do that in a way that gets you the kinds of responses that are useful. um, and we'll talk a little bit too about like way of being, like the unconscious ways that you show up that everyone sees but you. I actually had a really interesting moment with this recently around like apparently there's a way that I show up that I don't take full power even when I have it. Like I'm leading teams and I'm very inclusive. I'm like, okay, like what does everyone else want to do and where do you want to have power? And it's actually kind of disorienting for people, apparently. I didn't know this until recently. I started saying, okay, guys, here's what I want. Here's the structure and frame. And that's, one of the things we'll go into later in the course is how do you actually notice and speak for your desires. And when I started doing that, all of a sudden, everyone around me was like, oh, thank God. And I was like, wow, I wish I'd asked for that feedback years earlier, that people sometimes want me to take control, that it's clarifying for them. So you'll start to see these things that everyone is thinking about you, but not saying. Um, and then later in the course, we'll go into relational tools. So how do you access curiosity? How do you ask deeper questions? Like tools for that, like sentence stems, but also even, psychological tactics for training your curiosity. How do you have difficult conversations, fighting the boss battle of communication, like being authentic with people who don't want to be authentic with you? I think of that as like people have blast shields up often in conversations. And if you lower your blast shield to be honest and vulnerable, they may open fire while you're emotionally vulnerable. So, what do you do in that case? We'll talk about emotional resilience. How do you develop the capacity to be present, be with yourself, even when something gets intense? Um, so, difficult conversations, some of the same things we talked about on this webinar, like tools for open communication, and then how to celebrate and integrate, how to do self-care, how to really even like take a step back and appreciate yourself and other people in your life. And people who have gone through this have reported pretty amazing shifts. I'll read a couple. So one person said, I've gotten more in touch with the ways I get triggered when I need to ask for help. It feels like I can more readily identify my personal contexts around asking for help in the moment. Another person said, I'm experiencing deep quiet with others and more confidence to the point where I'm seeking out social interactions. Another person, I'm taking way more responsibility in my relationship with my husband. I'm beginning to see that many of my issues aren't about him. And I love that because I imagine that person being able to make requests, set boundaries that empower her rather than her depending on her husband to give her what she needs. Another said, I'm experiencing a lot more agency around how to navigate relationships and express what I need. I have more awareness of my words and their impact with my kids. I feel more grounded, real, and authentic in my interactions. And I'm finding that when I trust people enough to be vulnerable and to share things that matter to me, they tend to respond in a way that feels good, even if I don't have it all together in the moment. So those are some shifts that we heard. And the other one that really impacted and touched me that I don't have written down, but I've talked to a couple people who are really deep into consciousness work and authenticity and empathy, and they've had a really hard time relating with their partners. And they've asked their partners to go through the course. And all of a sudden, they're writing me having the experience that their partners all of a sudden can understand them more, can meet them, can have the kinds of conversations they want. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. And that's fundamentally what I really want. I want people in relationship of any kind, work, friendship, family, romance, strangers on the street, to be able to have conversations where we actually meet and see each other, because that's what communication and connection are about. And I think something massive is missed when we don't get that. So that's the course. I'll stick around for a minute or two more if there are any other questions. Thanks to those of you who have stuck it out this long. I feel like I should be saying something. I like telling stories at the end of the call, but honestly, my brain is kind of blanked right now. But I really appreciate the comment that we just got. As someone who has been into this type of work for years, I still find so many new and valuable things in what you've said. Thank you. Thanks, Amy. That feels really validating to hear. I put a lot of thought into this stuff. I find that there's a difference between knowing something and teaching it. And a lot of what I've been studying is like the skill of teaching. I like saying that teaching is general and learning is specific. And a lot of the time when we teach things, we teach the way that we've learned them, which may not work for other people. So a lot of what I've put into my courses, including the Authentic Life Leadership one, is thought of how different people learn and how to meet that. So written content, video content, exercises, people learn visually, kinesthetically, auditorily. So meeting those different needs. People have different perspectives than I can even imagine. Like some people need to feel more safe. Others need to like try things more wildly. I'm not going to think of other examples right now. Some people need lots of examples. Some people need theory. So I've really been putting work into understanding how to speak and teach in a way that hopefully can be valuable to many different people. Definitely open for feedback on that anytime. And for those of you who take the course, I hope that you feel met in the way that you learn best, because that's important to me. Communication is about what's received, not just about what's said. Okay. We're about at the time mark, so I'm going to end the broadcast here. You should be getting an email with a link to the course and a write-up on the link to the webinar as well, and a bit of a worksheet, and a link to the ALL, Authentic Life Leadership. So thanks for tuning in. I appreciated being able to do this.